When I opened my eyes, my daughter-in-law was kneeling beside me on the trail, her fingers wrapped around my left wrist, trying to unclasp the watch my son had given me 2 months before. "What are you doing?" I said. My voice came out thin, like something scraped hollow. She pulled her hand back fast. Too fast. And the look on her face, I've tried to describe it to people since, and the closest I can get is, caught. Not surprised. Caught. "You passed out," she said. "I was checking your pulse." I looked around. The Denver Botanic Gardens. The rose section, near the stone bench I always stop at. I remember the smell of something sweet, and the sun being too bright, and then nothing. Just black, like someone had switched off a light inside me. An older woman with a canvas tote was standing a few feet away, watching us with her arms crossed. "I called 911, she said to me. "Not to my daughter-in-law. They're on their way." My daughter-in-law stood up and smoothed her jacket. "That's not necessary. He's fine, he gets dizzy sometimes." The woman looked at her, the way you look at someone when you've already made up your mind about them. "I'll wait until the paramedics arrive," she said, and she didn't move. I should back up. My name is not important. What I am is a 63-year-old retired civil engineer from Denver, Colorado. I spent 31 years designing drainage systems and highway overpasses, and I need you to understand this. I am not a man who falls for things easily. I read the fine print. I ask follow-up questions. When my wife was alive, she used to joke that I would interrogate a waiter about where the salmon was sourced before I'd order. She passed 6 years ago. Breast cancer. Caught late. I won't say much about that except that she was the kind of person who made every room quieter when she left it, and I have spent 6 years learning how to live in that quiet. My son is 34. He lives in Phoenix now. He married his wife. I'll call her my daughter-in-law. About 4 years ago, and from the beginning something about her sat wrong with me. Not anything I could point to, just a feeling. The way she laughed a half second after everyone else, like she was checking to see if it was safe first. The way she took out her phone at dinner and tilted the screen just slightly away. Small things. The kind of things you talk yourself out of because you don't want to be the difficult father-in-law. My son is a cardiologist. That is relevant. 8 months ago, he drove up to Denver for the weekend, alone, which was unusual, and we had a good 2 days. Watched some football, drove out to Evergreen for lunch, talked about his mother. He seemed tired. I didn't push it. On Sunday morning before he left, he set a small box on the kitchen table. "I want you to wear this, Dad," he said. "It's a health monitor. Tracks your heart rate, sleep, oxygen levels. Given your age and your blood pressure history, I'd feel better knowing I can check in on you remotely." The watch was slim and expensive looking. Dark face, leather strap, nothing flashy. It didn't look like a medical device. It looked like something an architect would wear. "I'm 63, I said. "Not 83. He laughed. "I know. But you live alone, and I'm 600 miles away, and I worry. Humor me." I put it on. Of course I did. He's my son. And honestly, after what happened with his mother, after finding out too late that her numbers had been off for months and nobody caught it, the idea of being monitored didn't feel intrusive. It felt like he was paying attention. I hugged him goodbye on the porch and watched him drive away and thought, I'm lucky. Some men my age have sons who call twice a year at Christmas. Mine drives 6 hours to check on me. The first symptoms showed up about 3 weeks later. I was at my desk going over some consulting work. I still take on part-time, and I noticed my hands were shaking. Not badly, just enough that my coffee cup rattled when I set it down. I told myself it was caffeine and switched to tea. A week after that, I woke up at 3 in the morning with my heart hammering. Not the scared kind of awake. I wasn't dreaming. Just suddenly, abruptly awake, with my pulse going so fast, I had to sit up and put my feet on the floor and count my breaths until it slowed down. I called my son the next morning. The watch would have logged that, he said. I actually saw it last night. Your heart rate spiked around 3 a.m. You can see that in real time? I set up alerts. Anything over 140 wakes me up. I was going to call you, but it normalized within a few minutes. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, it was reassuring someone was watching. On the other hand, I realized I didn't fully understand what I'd agreed to. He could see on my heart while I was sleeping. While I was showering, probably. While I was arguing with the television during the news. Should I see someone? I asked. Let's give it another few weeks, he said. I want to get more data before we start chasing it. A few weeks. I was a man who read the fine print, and I let that go. I don't know what that says about me. Probably that I'm human. Probably that we all have someone we stop questioning. He called more often after that, which felt good at first, every 2 or 3 days, which was more than he'd called in the previous 2 years combined. We talked about nothing, about the Broncos, about a neighbor of mine who was renovating his fence, about a documentary I'd watched about the Hoover Dam that I couldn't stop thinking about. But he always asked, before he hung up, "You still wearing the watch?" I always said yes. My daughter-in-law started calling too. That was new. We'd never been close. Polite at holidays, a little stiff at the edges. Now she was calling to chat, asking if I'd eaten well, if I was sleeping, if I'd been out of the house lately. Sweet questions, careful questions. I told my neighbor about it. An old friend named Archie, 71 years old, retired firefighter, the kind of man who has seen enough nonsense in his life that he has a very simple filter for everything. "Your son call you this much before he gave you that watch?" Archie asked. I thought about it. No, and now he calls every few days? Yeah. Archie picked up his coffee. "So what changed? You get older? Or he got something he wants to keep track of?" I told him he was being paranoid. He shrugged and said maybe. But I thought about it that night. I thought about it the next morning, and I started paying attention differently. The dizziness started in month 2. Not every day, not even every week, but I'd be standing in the kitchen and the room would tilt, just slightly, like the floor was breathing. Or I'd be driving and have to pull over because the edges of my vision went soft and strange. I kept a log, force of habit from my engineering days. Dates, times, what I'd eaten, what I'd been doing. The episodes didn't match any obvious pattern. Not exertion, not diet, not stress, that I could identify. I asked my son to refer me to a physician in Denver, someone I could see in person. "I can manage this remotely," he said. "The data from the watch gives me more information than a general practitioner would get in a standard workup. Let me run some analysis first. I want a second opinion," I said. "From who? Someone who doesn't have access to months of your biometric data?" He said it gently, reasonably, but the message was clear. I know better, trust me, and I did. I hung up and I trusted him. And I didn't make the appointment. I'm not proud of that. I want to be honest with you about the choices I made because I think that's the only point of telling this story. Not to say I was a victim. To say I was a man who loved his son and let that love be used as a door. The woman with the canvas tote was named Beverly Marsh. She told me that later, at the hospital, while the paramedics were running an EKG and asking me questions. She was 68, a retired pharmacist from Aurora who walked the Botanic Gardens every Thursday morning. She had seen me from about 30 yards away when I went down. Not a slow stumble, she said. A hard drop, like a marionette with its strings cut. She'd been watching my daughter-in-law's hands when I regained consciousness. That was what made her stay. "She wasn't checking your pulse," Beverly told me. "The fingers were wrong. She was trying to get that watch off your wrist." My daughter-in-law had left by then. She'd given a statement to the paramedics, explained she was my son's wife, provided his contact information as my next of kin, and said she needed to use the restroom and didn't come back. At the hospital, the attending physician was a young woman who did not seem particularly interested in my son's remote data. She ran her own workup, and then she asked me something I wasn't expecting. "Have you had this watch tested?" I looked at her. "This model has been flagged in 3 incident reports over the past 14 months, she said. "Not in the US, overseas, where the unmodified versions are sold. But there's a version that can be modified to emit a low-frequency electrical pulse. Nothing severe, just enough to cause symptoms. Arrhythmia, dizziness, vasovagal syncope." She paused. "I'm not saying that's what this is. I'm saying I'd like to have it looked at before you put it back on." I sat in that hospital bed for a long time after she left the room. I thought about my son's voice, calm and reassuring on the phone. I thought about my daughter-in-law's fingers on the clasp. I thought about Archie sitting across from me at the kitchen table. So what changed? I unstrapped the watch and set it on the bedside tray, and I didn't pick it up again. Here is the part that is hardest to say out loud, even now. I did not want to believe it. I want to be precise about this, because I think sometimes people tell these stories, and they make themselves sound clear-eyed in hindsight, like they saw the truth and acted on it immediately. I didn't. I sat in that hospital for 2 days, and I invented 12 different explanations for what the doctor had told me. I thought, the watch is off-brand, the components are cheap, it's just a malfunction. I thought, Beverly misread what she saw. I thought, my daughter-in-law panicked. She doesn't know much about medicine. She was trying to help. I am telling you this because it is true and because I think the reason we don't see these things is not stupidity. It's that the alternative, that someone you raised could deliberately hurt you, is a truth so heavy that the brain just keeps putting it down. My son called me at the hospital. He was calm. He was concerned. He said he'd seen the alert from the watch and had been trying to reach me. He said he was looking into flights to Denver. Don't come, I said. A pause. Dad, I mean it. I need a few days. You're not well. You shouldn't be alone. I'm not alone, I said. Archie's here. He wasn't, but he would be. I'll call you in a few days. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, he said. Take care of yourself. I've replayed that conversation 100 times. The way he said okay, not disappointed, not worried, just recalibrating. The watch went to a university lab. A friend of Beverly's, her son-in-law as it happened, a materials engineer, agreed to look at it. I don't want to get into the specifics of what they found, partly because the legal proceedings are still something I was advised to speak carefully about, and partly because the specifics are almost beside the point. What matters is what they found. And what they found was that the watch had been modified. The casing had been opened and something had been added to the circuitry, something that didn't come from the factory. I hired an attorney. An old colleague connected me to her, a woman named Sandra who handles financial crimes and elder abuse cases, who sat across from me in her office in downtown Denver and listened to everything without blinking. Do you have documentation? She asked. I handed her my log. 37 pages of dates, times, symptoms, phone call records, the questions my son had asked, the referrals he'd deflected. She looked at it for a while. You were an engineer, she said. 31 years, I said. Good, she said. That's going to help. I will not walk you through all of it. The investigation, the attorneys, the forensic accountants who started looking at my finances and found small things at first. A power of attorney document my son had emailed me 14 months earlier, buried in what looked like routine estate planning paperwork that I had signed without reading closely enough. An insurance policy that named him as sole beneficiary that I did not remember agreeing to. Small things, each one explainable on its own. Together, a pattern. My daughter-in-law had a history I hadn't known about. A previous marriage in Texas to an older man who had died of cardiac complications. An inheritance dispute that had been settled quietly. I don't know what my son knew or when he knew it. That was for the courts to decide, not me. What I know is what I felt, sitting in Sandra's office on a Tuesday afternoon in February, looking at documents that described my life in terms I didn't recognize. Assets, beneficiaries, incapacity clauses. While outside the window Denver was doing what Denver does in February, which is pretend it might snow and then not. I felt something I don't have a clean word for. Not just betrayal. Something older than that. The particular grief of understanding that love was the method, not the feeling. That he had used the thing I felt for him as a mechanism. I sat with that for a long time. The trial was in the fall. I won't say which charges. Exactly, because some are still being appealed, and Sandra was clear about what I should and shouldn't say publicly. What I will tell you is that I stood up in that courtroom and I spoke. I gave my statement in my own voice, with my own words, and I did not look away from my son's face when I did it. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to flinch. Like he had spent so many months watching my numbers on a screen that he thought he knew exactly how much I could take. He was wrong about that. I am 63 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, in a house that has too many rooms for one person, with a dog named Chester who takes up most of the couch and has opinions about the television. I still take on consulting work. I still drive out to Evergreen on Sundays when the weather is decent. I have dinner with Archie on Wednesdays, and he never once says I told you so, which is the mark of a truly good man. My wife's garden is still in the backyard. Roses, mostly. I don't know much about roses. That was her territory, but I've kept them alive for 6 years, which I think counts for something. I wear a regular watch now. Analog. No data. No alerts. No one on the other end reading my pulse while I sleep. I think about something my wife used to say. She said that the people who love you don't need to track you. They just show up. She showed up every day for 31 years. I know what that looks like now. I know the difference. I told you at the beginning that this isn't a story about being a victim. I meant that. I made choices. I signed things I didn't read. I let someone I love talk me out of trusting my own body. Those are my choices and I own them. But I also got back up off that trail. I took the watch off. I sat across from a stranger named Beverly and let her tell me something I didn't want to hear, and I listened. I hired Sandra, and I kept my log, and I stood in that courtroom, and I spoke. 63 is not old. I know some people might hear a story like this and picture someone feeble, confused, easy to manage. I need you to hear me clearly. I am none of those things. I am a man who loved his son. I am a man who was wrong about who that son was. And I am a man who is still here, still watching the Broncos lose, still burning things on the grill, still keeping my wife's roses alive in the backyard on Chestnut Lane. Still here. Still standing. Where are you watching from tonight? I'd like to know.